Now we're going to do the blended value scales, and sometimes I like turning my paper, so just don't be surprised if I turn the paper a different direction. It's because I want to be able to get into a corner with my pencil or my blending stump, whichever I'm deciding to use. And we're actually going to start using this larger eraser and possibly the kneaded eraser. Technically, you are going to have to unwrap this, so I'm going to unwrap it and basically, it's kind of like a piece of gum. If you stretch it apart, it'll actually clean itself. And we'll talk about cleaning the erasers in a little bit. So now I'm going to start doing the blended value scale, and I'm actually going to use a number 2 pencil. And I'm going to go from the darkest value up here, which should be a number 9, all the way down to a 0 here at the bottom. And technically, this is going to look like the side of a box. Okay? And so I'm just going to take my number 2 pencil, and part of the reason I'm using the number 2 pencil first, and if you'll notice too, I'm going in a horizontal motion, and I'm lifting the amount of pressure off of the pencil so that it starts to get lighter as I go away from myself. And here I can see I had a break in my value. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another layer over the top, and you can see it's starting to transition from dark to light. And then I'm going to take my tissue. My tissue still has a good amount of value on it from before when I was doing that stepped value scale. So I'm just very lightly rubbing in a circular pattern to get a really nice blended value down here. And it actually created a really nice light value. There's a little bit of dark areas that I'm probably going to have to try to lighten up. And there I moved the paper on us by accident. So I'm going to take some of that number 9 value and I'm going to go back in here in another layer, and I'm going to create another layer of value on this paper. One thing that you need to be aware of is you could actually do this in your sketchbook too. I'm doing it right on the worksheet, but that is printer paper, and it's not a very good quality paper to be blending on. It can be done, but it's a little bit more difficult, so sometimes it's easier to do it in your sketchbook if that's what you want to do. Then I'm going to go in and I'm going to start adding some value with my ebony pencil, and I'm actually going to try to do a little bit of a diagonal here if I can, just to go a different direction than what I was going before. And I'm even going to go a little bit vertical here, and then I'm going to rub that in. But I am really, really pressing light. Like I'm hardly touching the paper at all. Basically, if you imagine like touching somebody's skin with a feather and you're touching it very, very lightly, that's what I'm doing with the pencil as I'm doing this. And then if I go back in here and I rub again, I'm going to get this darker value in here. And I actually have to bring this down a little bit farther. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to again add another layer, a light layer of ebony pencil. You can't do this all at once. It has to be done in layers. If you press too hard, there may be a point where you're not going to be able to erase a flaw that you made in the paper because you pressed too hard with the ebony pencil. So I'm just going to go in here. I'm going to very lightly start lifting my hand off the paper. I do have to be careful in here too, because as I'm rubbing, I just created a mark that I'm going to have to try to get out of here with either a blending stump, or maybe I can put some value over the top of it, and I'll show you what I mean because I don't think you can see it on the screen right now. But if I move my paper, hopefully you can see. I got to move the paper just the right way so that the light hits it right here. 1 second. Right in here, there's a line that I created with the ebony. So I need to go back in here with whichever pencil, and I need to add a little bit more value to even that out. Right now I'm actually using the number 2 pencil. Again, the number 2 pencil is harder than the ebony pencil, so it actually won't allow you to push as much graphite onto the paper. There I added more. I'm going to go back again, just like I did in the numbers 6 through 8. I'm going to actually add more ebony to the paper in order to get it really dark in just that one area. And eventually I'm going to press pretty hard here in order to get a really nice dark black, so that I've got a really nice black and a really nice white and all those grays in between, because remember that definition of value is black, white, and all the grays in between. And again, I'm just going to go in here and rub in order to get that to blend out the way that I'd like for it to. This is a pretty good example, but I am going to tell you one thing. There's a little bit of a break in the value here. So I have a break in value here, and I have a break in value right here, between here and here. That's not going to get you as much points as if you get this completely smooth. It's really pretty smooth the way that it is now, but I actually need to try to blend those situations out in order to get a higher score. There are more examples on the display board. I'm not going to spend more time blending that out because I've got 2 other examples I want to do here for you. So that's something that we're going to do at a later time. On this second example, what we're going to do is create dark values from the edges. And technically those dark values are going to create something that's like the cylinder that is on the table. So again, I'm going to, and actually I might even add a little bit more value to this number 9 spot. I'm even going to add a little bit more to the number 8. Because I want to grab some of those values in order to start blending from the edges. So I'm going to go from the edges, I'm going to go from the edges inward. And again, I'm blending in a circular pattern to get that value as blended as I can possibly make it. And again, I'm going to go back in with my ebony pencil in order to create some value into there. Now, I talked about using the erasers in a little bit, so I'm going to have to make a mistake here, and I probably will, because this spot is awfully small to go from really dark to white and then back to that black again. So what I want to do is I'm going to rub here, and I may very well, in a moment, have to erase some things. And then we're going to talk about eraser preference. So one thing that you guys should notice is I'm starting to get kind of gray here in the middle. So I'm going to need to take my eraser, and I'm holding the eraser at a really shallow angle, like it's almost lying on the paper. And I'm just, again, erasing in that circular pattern in order to get things as blended as possible. Some people really prefer a kneaded eraser. I don't tend to like those a lot, but again, you can pull these apart and they become really soft, and then what you can do is, after you get it pulled apart a lot here, you can actually go inside the areas and you can like kind of dab and twist, or you can actually rub. I'm not going to rub on here because if I rub too much, I'm going to create an area here if I rub too hard. Right there I pressed a little bit too hard, and you can actually see where the eraser mark is, so I have to go back in here with probably a blending stump later. So again, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to erase and get a really nice white, and hopefully you can see that. You can see I've got a really great line right there, but then I'm going to go in here with this kneaded eraser and I'm going to erase or lift the graphite off of the paper in order to blend that out together. And I need to blend and twist and blend and twist. And what happens is as the eraser gets dirty, you can actually pull it apart and it will clean itself. Okay, so I'm going to do that again on the right hand side. I'm just going to blend and twist, and notice how I'm kind of dabbing at the paper. I'm not just leaving the eraser right on the paper the whole time that I'm doing this in order to blend out the values that I have there. Now that I have that part done, I'm going to go back in here and I'm going to add a little bit darker value on the edges back with the pencil. And so hopefully now you're starting to see how we're going back and forth between the pencil and the erasers. And it does take quite a bit of concentration to do this, so sometimes I'm quiet and other times I'm talking. But I have to really concentrate in order to get the edges really nice. So here I've got a nice dark area, and if I move the paper, you can actually see where the breaks in the value are. So I'm going to take my tissue and I'm going to go back in here and I'm just going to blend that out until it's a really nice transition from really dark to light. And I had to move the paper because again the light is kind of deceiving because it's starting to make a shine on the paper. The graphite is too shiny for the camera to pick up what's really happening. So I'm going to go back in here again on the left hand side and I'm going to add that value on the left. And if you notice, this is actually starting to sort of look like a cylinder because I'm creating dark on the edges and it's light in the middle, and it's sort of creating the illusion of like a roundness to it. And then we'll see the difference between the cylindrical value and the spherical value in just a little bit here. I do have a little bit of breaks in my value that I'm going to have to try to fix, but actually it's pretty good because you can definitely see the lightness and darkness, and it actually does start to look more rounded. Again, I'm going to go in with my pencil and I'm going to true up the edges because that's a craftsmanship thing. When we're done with a drawing, we want to make sure that the very edges of the paper, if there's any left, that everything is nice and clean. So as I do this last example, the last example is supposed to look like a sphere or a ball. And what I'm going to do is create dark edges, and I'm going to have a light part in the center over here. In order to start doing that, I'm going to take from that number 9 value that I had, oops, and there's not much value back left on there, so I'm going to have to go back in here, and I'm going to have to color back again with my ebony pencil so that I've got some value to pick up from what's on the page. So I'm going to again just rub. I've got some value here. It's the most important to rub in a circular pattern on this sphere because rubbing in a circle like that is actually going to make this look more spherical or like a ball. And so hopefully you can start to tell I'm starting to get that light in the center and it's dark on the sides. I'm going to continue putting value on here until I have enough of what I like. And I'm actually going to switch pencils here for a minute. I'm going to start to use just the number 2 pencil because I want to put a little bit of value on here, but I don't want to put so much that I can't do anything to it. So technically, I'm going in here and I'm putting value in. Again, as I'm starting to add the pencil to this shape, I'm doing it in a circular pattern in order to make that value as blended as possible. And I know it doesn't look like that right now, but what I can do is I'm going to take my tissue and I'm just going to rub or blend that out. And so technically now you can see, because that pencil was so hard, it actually didn't allow me to get very dark value in there. So I'm going to take, again, I'm going to go with my eraser and I'm going to erase the center part in here, and I'm going to take my kneaded eraser and I'm going to go back in that middle section and I'm just going to pick up some of the values in order to create those really light, like number 1s and number 2s in that center area, plus a really nice highlight right in the middle so that I keep that super, super nice and white in the middle. And again, that's just because we need that much contrast in order to show the difference between light and dark of where different objects are. So again, I'm going in with my ebony pencil now, and I'm just doing a really, I'm not really pressing very hard at all. I know it looks really dark probably. Actually, it doesn't look that dark, but it definitely is adding some value to the edges. And hopefully as you're looking at this, it's starting to look more like a ball or a sphere. And I'm going to add value all the way around really lightly. And this is what I'm talking about. Sometimes I move my paper around in order to go different directions. This last time I added pencil, I went in an arc instead of into circles, and part of the reason for that is that the ebony pencil is so dark, I have to be really careful how I'm adding the values to it. This particular example is really difficult, and part of the reason is that it's a really small example. So sometimes when you look at some of the other artworks that are here and the fact that they're large, it's actually a little bit easier to work larger than it is to work so tiny. So there I've got my example. I'm starting to get that real spherical look to it. I do want to get a darker edge into this sphere, so I'm going to add one more layer of value. You're going to have to go back and forth until your sphere looks like it has values all the way from 0 to 9. And that means sometimes you'll have to add pencil, and other times you're going to have to go and erase. The last thing I'm going to do again is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to true up the edges so that my object looks as nice as it can without being blurry. So technically what I'm doing with erasing is I'm making it look crisp, as if I have glasses on if I needed glasses. Okay, if I am seeing 2020, obviously I'd want to erase that because it's going to make the whole object look blurry, and we don't want the blurriness in that object. So there we go. There is your value gradation sheet.